The yelling. We used to play this game at practically every new restaurant or pub we went to. I had a great time and got lots of inspiration for my works from it. I used to write largely action-adventure B novels. Although I was incredibly successful at paperbacks, I never quite made it to the top. Once, I had an editor give me a summary of the issue in her opinion. You're a pretty decent writer, but every book has the same plot. Hero defeats bad guys and saves the world. It's made you pretty good money, but I'd bet very few readers make it past the third book before they go looking for someone with more imagination. If you really want to succeed, you need to break out of your comfort zone. Write a romance, a historical piece, maybe some sci-fi. Good guys don't always win, and many die. Yes, I did inquire. Even though I tried, I was never able to complete anything. The man I was with was retired from some alphabet agency or other, a fountain of knowledge and ideas that I occasionally consulted when I needed a more comprehensive viewpoint. Some of the stories this person told would make you quite afraid. He has traveled the entire planet. He then grinned and told you it was all made up. Then he would stop smiling and declare anything like that should never, ever appear in one of my books. Following a few briefings, our game got underway. I was almost always shocked by his answers when I asked, "Who's the most dangerous man in the room?" He looked about the room absent-mindedly today, never focusing on one person for longer than a few seconds. "It's the guy in the black turtleneck. Really, look where he's sitting, back to the thickest wall in here with ready access to the kitchen exit and the front door. He seems too relaxed, and besides, he's got gray hair and a beard." He rolled his eyes. "People dye their hair all the time to achieve a certain result. Who's gonna worry about some old guy? He's dressed comfortably in clothes that don't draw attention. They're loose, but you can see muscles under there when he moves certain ways. Plus, his eyes haven't stopped moving for more than a second or two since we've been here. As far as being relaxed, you don't think someone who was jittery and nervous wouldn't draw attention. Even a bartender or waitress would flag it. Nervous people make lousy customers. How come he hasn't made you yet?" My pal grinned. "He made me the moment he laid eyes on me. If he viewed me as a threat, he would be more watchful, but he senses I'm not interested. After all, this is a pretty popular bar and restaurant. He probably thinks I just want a meal and a drink to wind down for a bit. If I made the slightest remotely hostile move, he'd notice. He doesn't look dangerous. He isn't that big or particularly mean-looking. They were called bad men in the Old West, but it didn't mean what most thought it meant. If you were labeled a bad man, it didn't mean you were evil or an outlaw. You could be a rancher or a shopkeeper. It meant you were a bad man to cross. Remember, the most dangerous is not always the most fit. There are power brokers out there who weigh 300 pounds and can barely lift a pencil, but if you piss them off, it can end very, very badly. They can go after your money, your wife, or anything that you hold in value will disappear right before your eyes, and there would be nothing you can do about it. It seems to me that he is observing you. You haven't done something foolish like rob someone, steal secrets, or have an affair with someone's spouse, have you?" At my pause, he burst out laughing, saying, "It must be a woman because you don't impress me as a thief. Or are they women? I've met your wife, and she's really pretty with a great disposition. She didn't know, did she?" It's meaningless, but I felt compelled to protect my way of life. As you are aware, I travel a lot for research and book signings. You may experience loneliness occasionally. Yes, and occasionally you do stupid things. Tell me that these were all one-night stands that occurred far away. He scowled at my silence. "I should have warned you to be careful, but it's too late. Does she have a husband? How does her spouse conduct himself? Does he have ties to organizations or individuals who could bring you great misery? Her spouse is a stupid prick. My father-in-law is the only dangerous person in my universe. Dan Lunsford." He remained silent for a moment before bursting into speech. "You are wed to Christy Lunsford. I had no idea how much of an idiot you really were. Christ Jesus, do you wish to die? Because you would disappear without a trace if the general ever found out. Please don't call me back." "Never. I'm heading out right now." I followed him, staring, wondering what the hell had happened, thinking no one could ever catch me, being extremely careful, playing far from home, rarely with the same woman twice, though I had developed a strong affection for one woman in Seattle, who looked amazing and was hot as hell in the sack. We'd been together 5 times, and each time seemed better than the last, both of us married and discreet. Our get-togethers scheduled to coincide with his regular business trips. We never stayed the night together, never exceeding 3 hours, and we never used motels. Her friend owned a cabin on one of the nearby lakes, the ultimate in seclusion and privacy, which made us feel even more intimate. We could purchase one right away if Christy took on the task. Her family was wealthy, having amassed fortune through cunning generational building blocks. Christy earned a degree in finance and entered the field of money management, which she attempted to explain to me on 2 occasions, once during our marriage and once when I used her as a source for a book. Despite my limited understanding, I knew she was an expert in the field. In addition to the money from her family and 3 trust funds, she made 4 times as much money as I did just from her salary alone, never having to use any of it. In reality, I'd shot her down rather quickly when I asked her if she might consider investing in a small cabin somewhere. She became mad, for whatever reason, and I dropped the subject right away. I knew her father didn't like me, but he never opposed the marriage. The one jab he threw was that Christy was old enough to make her own errors and learn from them. Her father was a retired general who was employed by a think tank in DC. After all, my wife came from a well-respected, old, and attractive family, so why did I act foolishly? For one thing, every time I hit a woman, especially if she was married, I got a kick out of knowing that I was probably sticking it to some fat cat lawyer or politician who looked down on me. For another, I felt like I was sticking it to my snobby wife if she'd managed to get on my nerves over something. My police sources would describe it as motive and opportunity, minimized risk and all those other terms. To be honest, I'd never seen her behave snobbish, but it had to be ingrained in her someplace. Her upbringing had to involve a feeling of entitlement. After all wealthy women were the same. Money and status were the main reasons I married her. She was the only person who worked while I wrote my first book, and I had to swallow my pride when she helped me along by using family connection. The only publishing house that would consider a deal with me was owned by her cousin, and that was only for e-publishing and paperbacks. The contract included the option for hardbacks, provided I met a certain standard, which I never seemed to be able to meet. Strangely enough, I was never once contacted about video rights. Maybe with this one. Sighing, I took out the check and headed home. I made sure to be up the next Monday before she left for work. Christy had dressed in the standard power suit of her class, matching skirt and jacket, silk blouse and pearls. No nonsense 2-inch heels. The only thing different was her hose. They didn't look like pantyhose, but it didn't mean anything. She often wore nice underthings to important meetings. She claimed it gave her an extra boost of confidence, knowing she was in a thong and stockings while reducing heavy hitters to wine. That next week, Christy seemed unusually busy with something to do with big money and a family scandal, so she and her team were doing damage control. I'll be gone by the time you return. I have to return to Seattle to see those experts I mentioned earlier for another consultation. I have a gut feeling that this will be a bestseller. She kissed me firmly on the cheek without making physical contact. That's good, sweetie. While you're gone, I hope you discover some intriguing things. What does that signify? I hope you find something worthwhile to include in the book so that it reads more smoothly. What did you interpret me saying? I loosened up as her innocent green eyes shone. Sorry, honey, but this one really has me wrapped tight. This ought to be my final study excursion for the time being. Do you miss me? Not if he's a good shot. What? Just checking to see if you were listening to me, she grinned. Be careful on your travels, honey. Here's my automobile. Image, her father continued to hammer home to her, your clients are the top of the food chain. You cannot drive yourself. You need to project a sense of belonging. She was very good at it. I had attended a few events with her and I didn't enjoy myself at all. It seemed as though the language wasn't the same. Why am I here? She grinned tightly and said, because you're my spouse and you want to help me. Would you mind if I made you look good? They really tried to make me feel at home, and in retrospect I should have fostered them a little more, since I bet every anecdote some of them gave would make a compelling novel. Eventually, though, it became less and less, and if I heard she had anything coming up, I'd make sure I had a research trip scheduled. You have my admiration. You're the real deal, my love, beautiful, intelligent, incredibly socially adept, and financially savvy. Have I overlooked anything? You left out a wildcat in bed, but I guess your memory is fading, I said with the first sincere smile I had seen in days. What? I must go. I'll see you when you return. Then, as the town car sped off, I wondered, I adore you. I decided that I had better finish my schoolwork when I got back. I was proud to be seen in her company, but my sly friend got the better of me and I checked out the place. We were in a nice restaurant, candles, soft music, the perfect atmosphere for seduction. She had outdone herself, and every man in the place turned when we walked in. Her little black dress was perfect, the diamond earrings I'd just given her glittering in her ears. She was twirling her hair, and I'd learned that was a tell for a night of hot time. It was an ordinary bunch of folks, save for one blonde who gave me the creeps. He saw, glanced at my date, and smiled, which was enough to put me at ease. I sensed a shift in the air in the room and turned to face the door as we were making small gestures toward each other, warming up, and sipping drinks after dinner before heading to the cabin. It's COULDNP. But there she was, resplendent in her outfit and jaw-dropping gorgeous. My wife should have been on the other side of the continent. What the devil was my wife doing there? She appeared to be searching for someone, so the blonde approached her, gave her a quick hug, and then took her to the table, giving her a little peck on the cheek as he pulled out her chair. There she was, sitting right in front of me, flirting with a man across the country from home, and I couldn't do crap about it without giving myself away. I tried to will myself invisible, but they never once looked my way, preoccupied in a conversation that didn't seem serious. I heard her laugh peal out over something as she put her hand on his arm. My inspiration struck, and I quickly explained that I was supposed to be there, giving Rose a few minutes to clear before I went over. Jasmine looked up, and instead of looking shocked, she smiled. After all, she didn't know I was with anyone, and the last thing my date needed was exposure. You're right there, honey. I was hoping you would be here. I would have gone to the hotel if I could have found a register. I decided to take a chance since you had brought up this location a few times. And please turn on your phone before I forget. Maybe I was home free until I took it out and reactivated it to read the texts and messages she had left. I'm happy to see you, but tell me why you're here. Do you recall the account I worked on, the one with the controversy and old money? This is where it led me. Well, James Rogers, she said with a smile as he stood up to shake my hand. Here, I am her point of contact. I sighed with relief, having eaten beforehand, and as they were finishing up, I sat and struck up a conversation with Jasmine. I told her that I was staying at a cabin owned by my contact, so I could have greater access, and she immediately bought it. The check for my dinner was delivered by a new waitress, Jasmine, who is always frugal, advised me not to pay it because of expense accounts, so I gave her my card, which she examined carefully. James Morris, yes, that's me. Please, may I see some ID? A watch list for stolen identification includes your name. I sincerely apologize, sir. I'm just doing as I'm told. To be sure you're safe, you might want to give your credit card provider a call. I pulled out my driver's license and she gave it a quick glance, saying, yep, sub. Now I was going to spend hours on the phone. You are the one. I have served you, James Morris. She took a picture of me with the paperwork she pushed into my hands and turned to go. When I looked at Jasmine, I was filled with complete horror. The blonde guy was smiling, and she didn't appear upset at all. Jasmine's countenance altered, and I had the impression that it was a mix of contempt and hatred, similar to the look she gave miscreants in her work life. There you go, Jimmy. If all goes well, you should have a brand new divorce in approximately 5 months. With a clear conscience after that, you can screw any road whore you come across. However, it's unlikely that you possess one of those, do you? You'll emerge a wealthy man, so don't panic. All you are able to touch is my pay. I never got to drive any of her cars, but she had a mint-condition 66 Mustang convertible, 77 Firebird, an Austin Healey 3000. She also had a boat and ski-doos, and even residences. Nevertheless, due to the significant difference in our incomes, I will be required to pay you maintenance for a period of 3 years. I believe I'll pay you in full and write it off as a lesson discovered. You were the project I was working on, the one about family and scandal, in case you haven't worked it out. Be kind to all of us and leave discreetly. I was thinking of giving you the Firebird for an anniversary gift. Screw that up, It's tragic, Jimmy. If you had stayed faithful, you would still be enjoying an easy life and most of the toys. I'm sure it will be a nice learning experience for you, having to pay your own way. Jess, is there any? She said, clutching onto the blonde, and I could tell she was crying, but her voice was as tough as nails. Not at all. In every format and tongue imaginable. I am aware of your Southern Belle in Georgia and the Cowgirl in Tulsa. Here in the Northwest, you have a steady now. Is she aware of your previous victories? If not, she will do so right now. Jimmy, her spouse is not happy about you and has the ability to cause you a great deal of distress. My discovery was just coincidental. The spouse of your new honey holds a prominent position in the West Coast branch of an alphabet agency. He had her watched because he felt there was a disconnect between them. After receiving the photos, he used facial recognition software to quickly identify you. In his brief time here, he noticed that you were familiar. He had a private conversation with his father, and the rest is history, as they say. You might anticipate having a very awkward talk with him shortly. We've packed and stored your belongings. This is the solution. Jimmy, I'm not kidding when I say that you must flee as soon as possible. Although it won't help, it could improve your mood. Additionally, he won't approach you abruptly. He'll make your life miserable, and then one night he'll reach out of the shadows and take you away. Hurry up. I did, running from the restaurant to their laughter, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Jasmine sent a sorrowful glance at her friend. Think he bought it. You saw his face, the man is terrified. I know you have the right, James, but you're not going to hurt him too badly, are you? Not really. It's equally Abby's fault because she had the option to say no. I'm going to play tricks on him and make him fearful for a long time. For the rest of his life, he will never get a full night's sleep. He will discover upon arriving at the airport that he is on the no-fly list and that no automobile rental company will be prepared to provide him with a vehicle. It will take him some time to realize that getting around will require him to take the bus. Due to the reported stolen card, his cards will be temporarily suspended, but this suspension should only last a day or two. Is his financial account doing well? Not really. He enjoyed traveling in style and playing with his toys. He didn't have any expenses to pay now, after all. I almost told him who I was just to see how he would react. He would have soiled his trousers. Will you take me to the hotel? I'm exhausted. With a grace that belied his stature, the blonde man got up from her chair and assisted her in getting out. He then drove her to the most luxurious hotel in the area and ensured she arrived safely in her suite. He marveled at her husband's stupidity as he cast a regretful glance at her. This one was pure gold, not like his wife. Jasmine, goodbye. Rest well at night. One day, my grandma told me that after a restful night's sleep, any difficulty might be handled more quickly. I regret the way we met. She grabbed him by the shoulders and bent down to plant a kiss on his cheek. She thought, damn it, where was he 3 years ago? She then grinned pitifully. After 6 years of marriage, he had been with his wife for 3 more than she had with Jimmy. She really smiled when he got up, and surprisingly, she slept well. I wonder how awkward Jimmy's evening was. That was a very unpleasant short answer. When I realized I'd been tagged and couldn't fly, I nearly lost it. I could smell my father-in-law in this. When I saw soldiers with firearms in uniform approaching me, I stopped complaining. Some attempted not to show their smiles. They collaborated extensively with the agency that had alerted them to the situation. They had a code for personal matters and another for adultery on a law enforcement officer's spouse, in which case he had both working against him. I got to yell to a couple who followed me to the vehicle counters. After the third try, they came over to me. "You're creating a commotion, sir. You appear to be unable to rent a car at this time since you were added to the no-fly list. Before we arrest you for being a vagrant and causing a nuisance, I advise you leave." They guided me to the bus terminal and took me out of the airport. I should be able to settle my credit by the time I reach home, as I only had enough money to get me halfway there. After 3 grueling hours of waiting on a hard bench, the bus seat seemed like bliss. I called while I slept all the way to Tulsa. I got an earful instead of assistance. Last night, I received a phone and an email with some images. My husband receives the images if I can help you in any way. Best of luck, my friend. I went to an ATM, certain that my account was stopped, after it suddenly occurred to me to attempt using my debit card. I took out enough cash, which surprised me to find intact and accessible, to buy meals, a few outfit changes, and a cheap suitcase. After traveling for 2 days, I finally arrived in Arlington and went straight to the storage facility, where I was relieved to find my car and all of my clothes. Perhaps things were improving. The next day, I received new cards. A voicemail informed me that if I didn't pick them up at my previous residence by the end of the day, they would be thrown away. Walking up the steps of an old brick home crushed my heart. The cards came with a note. "Until we sign the final decree, this is our last conversation together. You will be subject to a restraining order if you return." I took the documents to the lawyer I had hired as soon as it arrived at my new residence. He examined them. "Please sign them before she decides otherwise. Nothing you accomplish will ever be greater than this. How can I avoid getting a divorce? Can you provide us with counseling?" His smile faded. "Your wife left you a separate message in here. She threatens to unleash the entire legal team on you if you give her even the smallest amount of trouble. You would go bankrupt from the legal bills alone, even with the money she will give you. Sign the documents, don't be a moron." Yes, I did. I received the decree 5 months later. It seems that none of us had to be there or even speak. Arlington was a suburb of Washington, and many federal employees reside in the gated or better-off neighborhoods. Although I didn't live near such wealth, one evening as I was leaving a bar, 3 guys grabbed me and covered my face with a sack. I was asleep within seconds of whatever they placed on it. One of them lifted my head and whispered in my ear as I awoke tethered to a horse. "Just a friendly reminder. You are still remembered by us." He guided the horse a short distance before unleashing a powerful blow. Not on the horse, but on my behind. For 2 months, I had a handprint on me. He would release the horse into a paddock next to the road, a road that was frequently used by school buses. The bus driver took a lot of pictures before he summoned the locals. Fortunately, I still had the bag covering my face when the photos appeared on the local news that evening. They also did not reveal my identity. After filling out a report and receiving a jail sweatsuit, I was transported home. They said they would look into my account, but I never heard anything more from them. I moved deeper south, felt it was time for a change, and started to freak out whenever I heard a loud boom. Strangely enough, a lot of people bought my novel. In the first 6 months, I earned enough money from it to live comfortably for 2 years. Subsequently, I received a letter from my publisher stating that they had no plans to offer me another book, as it was the last one under contract. It took several months for me to locate a different Florida publisher that would collaborate with me, provided that I agreed to a meager 2-book agreement. I accepted it and gave them a book that I had already penned. I simply didn't want to offer them both at the same time even though I had another completed. They have success with the book publishing. When I declined another deal, they were taken aback. I discovered a highly connected realtor who worked out a respectable agreement with a more mainstream home. After 2 weeks at the bottom of the bestseller list, my debut book with the new publisher was no longer enough. One of my earlier 2 that we purchased the rights to became available on streaming services. I kept a low profile and acquired a tiny cottage in the interior of Florida. After that, I ran into a local who was conducting research. She was a young, bold woman who made her life by hunting pythons in the Everglades. It appears that the state paid a respectable bounty on them. I was impressed by her marksmanship, and she was impressed that I was a writer. I sat her down and told her everything about me, including the cheating, as we started to get serious. I assured her that I wouldn't even consider looking at another lady if we went exclusive. After giving it some thought, she took me out in her airboat the following morning. I was anxious since we were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by tall grasses. She remarked, "I thought about what you said last night," before dropping her rifle to her shoulder and missing the target. She then smiled as she used a long-handled hook to drag a 16-foot python into the boat. "That is valued at $200. As I already stated, I won't be concerned about your faithfulness. Happy will drive you to our current location if we are married and you mess around, but he won't give you a ride back. Still desire me?" I turned to face her in her low-cut jeans. We returned to solid ground and completed the transaction. 4 months after the marriage, she was beginning to show signs of it. My next book, set in the Florida Everglades and centered around treachery and revenge, did incredibly well. The protagonist was a female, a very competent, self-assured woman. I had to return to some of my old haunts to speak with a producer who was spending some time on the East Coast. He was quite eager to obtain the video rights, stating that the images would be fantastic. I smiled, picturing a film team in the Florida Keys being eaten alive. Even after 2 years of living there, I still needed to apply repellent to any exposed flesh. My wife found it humorous that they didn't appear to bother her. My agent and my wife threatened to kick me in the butt, so I decided not to go. Carly informed us that we needed a larger home and that she was pregnant again. She had to accompany me. I assumed she would feel uneasy being away from home when we first started dating, but she surprised me. When we had to go to events linked to my job, it made me anxious and twitchy. She also cleaned up extremely nicely. When she saw me, she would smile and lick her lips in a way that she knew made me wild. She would then return to conversing with a smooth corporate type who had no chance whatsoever of winning. She insisted that we bring Jeremy, who was 2, along. She insisted on taking us to several locations in Washington, D.C., and I was afraid I would have to take her out of the Smithsonian. Before we met with the producer and his staff, my agent, who had traveled up with us, spent some time with them. When we first went in, she was beaming. After some haggling, they signed an option on the book and offered me $100,000, which meant that when they created it, I would receive nearly $1 million before expenditures and taxes. I could tell Carly was smiling, thinking about the new house she was going to build on the 200 acres she had been eyeing since it went up for sale. She was confident we would receive a decent price even though it had been on the market for a year and not many people wanted to live there. Carly wanted to see my old area, and even though it made me uneasy, she typically got her wish. When 2 girls showed interest in me, her father informed me she could beat the shit out of them simultaneously. "You never had a chance, son," he smiled. Jeremy's stroller was brought out, and we strolled through the leafy streets lined with mansions. I wished I was back at our Florida house, where it was scorching hot and pouring rain. We paused when Jeremy started to fuss so I could pick him up. Though I saw the pair approaching us, I didn't give them much thought until they were just in front of us. I raised my head and met Jasmine's eyes directly. I couldn't place the blonde man who was with her, even though he looked familiar. Jeremy was grinning as their 3-year-old daughter chattered away to him. She gave me a moment's bewildered look before grinning. "Hello, Jimmy." "Jasmine." Up until Carly jabbed me in the ribs, I was on alert. "Darlin', aren't you going to introduce me to your friends?" She placed her hand on mine, but her expression warned, "Don't touch. This is my son, Jeremy, and my wife, Carly, Jasmine. This is Jasmine, my ex-wife, Carly. I apologize, but I'm unsure of the name of James, my spouse. Tiffany is this small beauty." It dawned on me who he was when he declined to shake my hand. The restaurant guy, the husband I had cheated on. Likes seemed to have flocked to it. Despite his advanced age, he continued to work, avoided travel, and joined as father-in-law at the think tank he had assisted in founding. With a clear message in her eyes, Carly moved in front of me as I took a step back. All he could do was smile and tell her she had a lovely child. Jasmine smiled as I turned to leave. "I read your books, believe it or not. You've improved greatly. I really enjoyed your last one." "Thanks," I murmured, taking a step back. "I believe I've matured at last. I would like to say that if I had acted sooner, Carly would not be in my life. I believe everything turned out nicely for each of us in the end." She chuckled. "Learned from a real writer. Jimmy, goodbye." Watching them go, Jasmine and her new spouse were standing on the pavement. "Think they'll stay together?" Her spouse smiled. "I believe that. He wouldn't be foolish enough to risk what he now has, in my opinion. Besides, if my reading of her was accurate, he would be gator food in less than a week if he tried anything. He appears to have landed on his feet." She gave his arm a rub. She caught him quickly, at least. "To get you to go out with me, I had to pursue you for 18 months. You are aware of my feelings. However, I had no desire to be the rebound guy. I wanted enough time to pass before you expressed confidence. You're not too smart to work at a premier think tank. I informed Daddy that you would be mine before the 6 months were up. Well, to those who wait, all good things will come. Which gender will it be, a boy or a girl?" She placed her hand on her abdomen. "I wanted to give you a surprise." "How were you aware of it?" "You rub your stomach a lot and had the same smile on your face when you were carrying Tiffany. Not bad for the tank's dumbest guy, huh?" She remarked. "You have your moments," as he stooped to retrieve their daughter. She then burst out laughing. "Strapping him to a horse, bare and backwards, you really think that was necessary? Why do you believe that I was the one? He was infatuated with 4 women, as you know. It's the Tulsa cowboy for me. In addition, I would have fastened him beneath the creature so he could savor whatever emerged from its rear. What would you say to an ice cream cone, Tiffany?" "Yes, Mommy, hurry up." Grinning, she trailed behind them along the pavement. taking in her daughter's animated chatter. She'd seen the look in his eyes when he saw her ex, so he could deflect all he wanted. My comment, the ex-wife and her family did dirty acts. In your world they felt it was their right and got away with it. Glad I don't live there, what a terrible place. Oh, I forgot, if he's a good boy she'll give him a car for his birthday. There was no real marriage from the start. Her real husband was her trust funds and possessions. Like I said before, he was lucky to get away from her and her family.